Slightly out of it. Now, my name is Steve Campbell. I'm an advisor to Senator John Madigan. As you're probably aware, Nick Xenophon was supposed to be here as well. Unfortunately, Nick is pretty crook. He's laid up in bed in Adelaide, so he can't be here today. Nick's advisor, Sarah Minnie, is here. So for any of you who really wanted to have a word to Nick, just wave your hand again, Carol. There she is up the front. So any of you that wanted to have a word to Nick or to discuss anything with him at the end of the meeting, please come up and see Sarah. She'd be glad to sort of have a bit of a chat to you. Now, we've got a few speakers tonight, and then after that, the floor will be opened up to everybody. As I think will be reiterated by everybody, everybody's opinion is well and truly welcome here. There are no rights and wrongs. Basically, everybody has a right to express their opinion and to be heard respectfully. So basically, here everybody, if you disagree, we know we all have disagreements in some of these areas. If you disagree with anything, listen to it, have your say afterwards, okay? And then you'll be listened to just as respectfully. One thing I'd like to ask, just as a side note, could anybody here who is either by the pro or con side of this, or anybody who was bussed in or flown in, can you wave your hand, please? Okay, good. Now that's one argument we'd like to drop straight away. People come to these meetings because they are genuinely concerned on both sides and for a lot of issues. So the idea that either side is just shoving people into meetings just because they want to build the numbers is a bit insulting to either side. So let's respect each other and the reasons that we come here. Now I'm going to introduce Senator Madigan, just going to have a brief chat, and then we'll get to a couple of the speakers. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this evening here to Portland, whether you're for or against wind farms. This has been a subject that I've been interested in for a number of years, and pre my political life. And I know people who are for wind farms, friends of mine, and I've got friends of mine who are vehemently opposed to wind farms. So I have a very good exposure to the arguments for and against. And one thing that I'll say for my friends in the argument, that none of them resort to a fisticuffs and we all sit in the same room together. My experience has been of the majority of people in the debate that they respect the fact that other people are entitled to their opinion, and that's what a democracy is about. Now, having, as I'm sure you're all aware, I've held a number of these forums in New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria, and here in Portland tonight. And as I said, I welcome people's opinion no matter what it is. And that's what I'm here, is to listen to your concerns. With that, Steve will ask the next speaker, and as Steve said, Sarah's here from Nick's office. Nick was truly apologetic that he couldn't be here tonight, but he looks forward to hearing your concerns in relation to wind farms. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Also, at the end of the night, if you want to bring anything up with either John or myself, please do. Or I'm sure either any of the speakers would like to see, if you'd like to have a chat to them, please have a chat to them as well. One last thing, as you can see, there's a couple of cameras here. Video camera at the back that we always tape every one of the forums, so that's Senator Madigan's got a video camera that just tapes everything up here. This is for television over here, and we've got just a gentleman in the front who is just taking a few photos and that of the front here. It's not going out there, but if anybody's got any problems with that, please let us know. All right, now I'll just move on and we'll get the next speaker, and it's Lane Crockett, who's the General Manager of Pacific Hydro in this area. So if you'd like to make him welcome, he's got a few things he'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here this evening. Pacific Hydro owns and operates the wind farms at Cape Bridgewater and Cape Nelson here in Portland, and the wind farms down close to Port Fairy at Codrington and Yambuk. Now, our Codrington wind farm has been operating more than 10 years. And following some claims that were made on TV about ill health at Waubra, we received a call from an elderly couple who lived near to the Codrington wind farm. And they rang and they asked us, are we going to get sick now? Now, I say this not with disrespect for people who feel effects from a wind farm or feel that they're not happy with a wind farm. But I say it because of some of the things that have been said in the community or in the public recently, in recent times, alleging that you will get sick because you live near a wind farm. The Pacific Hydro takes those claims or allegations very seriously. So when we first heard of this, we reviewed the relevant literature, and then we took advice from governments, both state and federal, and reputable health bodies. Now, for example, a group of health bodies, including the Public Health Association of Australia and the Royal Australasian College of Physicians, found the following, and I'm going to quote this directly. There is no credible evidence in the peer-reviewed published scientific literature that there are any direct adverse physiological health effects from exposure to wind turbines, and that wind power is associated with a high degree of safety compared to the significant and well-documented adverse health impacts of fossil fuels and the risks of nuclear energy. Even so, Pacific Hydro decided to measure the infrasound emitted from our wind farms, as it is what ill health is being blamed on. We conducted our measurements to determine the levels of infrasound that might be problematic to nearby residents. What we found was that the levels of infrasound measured at the wind farm are lower than those at the beach at Cape Bridgewater. They are lower than nearby to a gas-fired power station, and they were lower than those in the Adelaide CBD. In short, infrasound exists all around us. It is generated from man-made and natural sources and from within the body itself. We also note that the readings are well below levels which are detectable to humans, let alone harmful. Now shortly you will hear from Stephen Cooper, who I'm guessing, and I admit I'm guessing, is going to tell you that the infrasound inside a house is higher than inside the house is higher than it is outside. And this may well be true. What we dispute is that the effect of the wind farm on the infrasound levels inside a house, as infrasound is generated from many sources, such as fans, fridges, air conditioners, and the wind blowing over the house itself. So performing infrasound readings inside a house is meaningless unless you turn off every appliance and you take everybody outside and then you turn the wind farm off and turn it on again and see what the net difference is. Now, Channel 7's Today Tonight program recently ran a story in South Australia about possible health impacts of wind farms. Now, the most interesting aspect of this show, which may yet be shown in Victoria, is that it featured a writer who was a prominent climate change denier and the Institute of Public Affairs, a right-wing organisation well known to be funded by fossil fuel and tobacco interests. This person and groups such as the IPA seek to sow doubt about the solutions to climate change by questioning the science and the reliability and safety of renewable energy. Their interest is not in the health and well-being of communities, but the maintenance of the status quo and the protection of vested interests. However, it is fair to say that all forms of power generation have varying impacts on communities around them. Given the rates of lung cancer are double the national average around the Playford Power Station, a coal-fired power station near Port Augusta in South Australia, Pacific Hydro proposes that the federal government review the health impacts of all forms of power generation. We believe a national review of the health effects of power generation, including wind, would be instrumental in determining what mix of power generation technologies would be most beneficial for Australia. And given his interest in this subject, we call on Senator Madigan to support this proposal. I'd like to finish by thanking the community of Portland for their support. I encourage you, if you are a resident of Portland and you have an experience of the wind farm at Cape Bridgewater or Cape Nelson South or down towards Yambuck and Codrington, please make your thoughts known, whatever they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Now, just before, sorry, just one second.
Did you want to say anything now?
What I'll do now is I'll actually get Steve Cooper, who Lane just referred to. Steve Cooper, who I'd love to give you all his qualifications, his background. I don't know them all, I'm afraid. But Steve is an acoustician. He's worked in the Australian Defence. Actually, I think he's still doing something for the Australian Defence Department. United States military. I think he's worked in airports around the world. His specialty is in sound. I can't put it as well as he would, so I'm just going to hand over to Steve and let him run through, just to give you an idea of some of the studies that he's been doing in this particular area.
Good evening. I'm an acoustic engineer, and my job is to measure, assess and investigate noise problems. In some cases provide solutions, in some cases give recommendations to sort out problems. I've been doing it for quite a few years, and in the process of doing all sorts of investigations of noise, you often get complaints from residents, industry, about music, traffic, all sorts of disturbances that people have. Swimming pool pumps, childcare centres. In a lot of cases, when you look at these issues, you look to see if there is a problem, whether there is a valid complaint or not. And in some cases, there are no basis for the complaint in acoustic terms. There can be other factors, and in other cases there are clearly problems, and in some cases there are marginal issues. And so when you're presented with a problem to look at what is going on in terms of a noise issue, you have to look to see about the facts and go in independently to look at what's happening, conduct measurements, and see if you can come up with a hypothesis, a conclusion, or proof of whatever is happening to then assist in resolving the issue. And therefore, an experienced acoustician starts at that point to see where there is an issue, a problem, or what can be done. And the basis of starting from any of that point is to get factual material about what's happening. In terms of all people presenting issues, and in particularly looking at noise studies for wind farms, it appears that some people that have done measurements for community or residents have been labelled anti-wind farm people. I can make it categorically clear that I'm not anti-wind farm. I'm there and have been looking at some issues in terms of noise. It can be equally said that people that do work for wind farms would therefore be pro-wind farm. And some of them would also say, no, we're looking at an independent situation. Being a professional engineer, I'm a fellow of the Institution of Engineers and a member of the Australian Acoustical Society. I am required under their Code of Ethics to provide information and present material, contrary to what has been said in some of the work that I've done. And if you're able to see what's on the screen, it's actually the Code of Ethics of the Australian Acoustical Society, and it covers both the pro-wind farm acousticians and the anti-wind farm acousticians. They are all required to provide the information in a truthful manner, and they also have to be conscious of the community effects. Last year I was asked to review a wind farm application for a proposed wind farm in central New South Wales. I and another consultant independently were conducting reviews, and both of us had some problems with the terminology and the information that was provided in the report. And it's looking purely on an acoustic issue about compliance providing the results. I did that, and then some other people said, and as Lance was saying, there's a question, are we going to be sick? Are we going to be affected? And I said, I don't know, because the report doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't say you won't be affected, and it doesn't say you will be affected. So I don't know what's going on. Can I go and see about what's happening at a wind farm? Can I go to some residents and people who are logged as complainants? So I went through and skipped down a couple of slides. We can. You won't see this picture that well, but this is a typical map that identifies a wind farm. In this case, the turbines are marked in red, and they draw circles to indicate distances from the turbines to the houses, because they're looking to get an indication how far away are we from the turbines, because that's a first step to find if we're going to be affected. Next slide is an expansion for, this is Capital Wind Farm. It's in New South Wales, it's not far from Canberra, and there are some lines there that indicate houses, and these houses are more than 2 kilometres away from turbines. And there are other houses which are 4 and 5 kilometres and some only 1.5 kilometres. I got invited to a number of the houses, and sometimes I went there, I didn't hear a bloody thing. I said, what are you on about? Other times I could hear the turbines, and other times you could knock me over with the noise that was occurring. So I got variations which is to be expected with anything that occurs. But these people were telling me that they had problems, and I listened to them. I said, what can I do? And I took some measurements. These are contours which you won't see from back there, but they talk about noise levels that should be occurring from a wind farm, a predicted noise level at a house. Well, I was there measuring, unfortunately 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting noise levels which were much greater than what was predicted. There was no other noise in the area, and I'd had the night before when I wasn't getting any noise, so I actually had the difference, and the only difference in the noise environment at that time was the turbines. I also had the situation during the course of the monitoring, they stopped working. So I didn't have to go and turn the wind farm off, I actually had a comparison. I measured and I found noise. Next slide. What we have is that this slide talks about the response of the human ear. There are a series of curves there, and the red lines show that the ear is non-linear. The bottom line is down near the threshold of hearing, and in this case it covers the audible range, what people with good hearing can hear. And the red line, the threshold, indicates that as far as a sound level meter is concerned, you need a lot more energy in a pressure wave for it to sound as loud as a mid or high frequency. As the intensity of sound changes, so does the response of the ear. And so when you use meters, things will change in how the ear responds at different levels in amplitude and frequency. Next slide, please. So what we have is that a general noise descriptor called dBA is used by authorities, EPAs and the like for measuring air conditioners. You'll see a label on it that says a certain dBA level. You can measure your music, you can measure a pub, you can measure a factory, and a lot of it is in dBA. Now what happens is the blue curve in this graph is an electronic filter that approximates the response of the human ear. And what happens by that graph is that on the left-hand side, which is the base, it rapidly attenuates low frequency. So all the work that's been done 20 years ago that talked about noise of infrasound and low frequency said that using dBA presents a problem because it's no good for measuring low frequency. Next slide. What they do, and you'll see in various reports, they whack a meter out, they measure some noise over 2 weeks, they do some statistical analysis and talk about the noise level which will be occurring at a resident's property versus the wind that occurs at the wind station on the wind farm. And this is a standard curve, it appears in lots of reports. There's a slight problem with this curve, and this is capital, so it's nothing about down here. And what happens is that the blue dots bottom out. And they bottom out in this case because the instrument didn't measure low enough. So they did an average on the wrong sort of data set. They got a curve, and the curve says we get a certain noise level or we get background plus 5. These are the regression curves that occur. Next slide. The problem we have in using some instrumentation that doesn't measure low enough is that the top graph is noise levels over 24 hours using a $20,000 sound level meter. The middle graph is using a $4,000 or $5,000 noise logger, which a lot of people use for doing monitoring. And what happens is that the middle graph shows numbers not as low as the top graph because the instrument bottoms out. So they report the wrong numbers. The bottom graph in this picture is actually the power output of Capitol and Woodlawn, which are near this location and cause the impact. And there's a pattern that shows there that as the power output of the wind farm increases, so does the bottom line in the graph. The bottom line is called the background level, and this is a pattern that appeared day after day after day. Now this was saying that the overall noise increased, and it was indicating that a noise came up. Now the noise can also come up by the wind. So there's a combination of wind and the wind farm, but there's a pattern that appears repeatedly throughout the day. And the problems are that the noise levels on this testing are above what was permitted. Next slide. This is a continuation back at the same house at Capitol, and there's been 5 months of monitoring done that involves wind measurements. This is a bigger graph that you might be able to see. And what happens is that the right-hand side of the graph, about 6 o'clock at night, the bottom line is well above 40. The winds come up. The problem is that the limits predicted for this wind farm were 36. And we have noise levels that's way above. Next. There's a proposal in South Australia for a wind farm that has been to the ERD court and then to the Supreme Court. And this is the noise levels that occur in a rural environment, nowhere near a road. There's no wind farm there at the moment. These are the noise levels. A little bit more sophisticated meter, but it still bottoms out at 15 dBA, and the average level throughout the day is less than 30. In actual fact, the background level, other than 4 events, is less than 20, and at night it's a lot quieter. So what this is describing to the community in an acoustic term is saying it's pretty darn quiet. And if you have a noise number that allows you to be X dB above the background, it will create an impact. And what the communities around some of these wind farms are finding is, in some cases, if they can hear a noise, it's no good for them because they're used to peace and quiet. Some people, they can tolerate a noise. Some people, they're not worried about the noise. You get the variability, it happens everywhere in all sorts of things. If you get involved in doing complaints about music, you'll find the music that your children play, you don't like no matter what level it is. You can't stand the music. And if you're a lover of opera, then the moment it's on, they can't stand your music. So there's a selective nature in terms of people, the type of music. And this thing happens in every industry that occurs that generates noise. It's not unique to wind farms. But you have this matter of what becomes a reasonable balance. I'm not making no opinions yet, I'm just providing facts of what's happening. Next. This is a mumbo-jumbo that they do with the data to take the analysis, produce curves, and what it shows is that it's a graph of the wind speed versus the background level, and it shows that as the wind comes along, it creates noise, no doubt about it. And so they have a formula that says we add on to the noise for our tolerance, and they normally run at this background plus 5 criteria. Background is taken as the minimum level, and all it shows is that as the wind drops off, it gets quieter. This is a rural environment, and it says when the turbines are not operating, the minimum level is less than 25 dBA. It's not what you get in the city, it's not what you get in the middle of Adelaide, it's what you get out in rural environments. It is quieter in rural environments, and these people have a different appreciation of noise compared to those that live in the city. Next. One of the problems is that I talked about the A-weighted results and what has been happening. In this curve, there are a series of power curves or noise level emissions from turbines. This is published data and measured data. And what happens is that the graph has in the top section curve going up, and in the bottom section the curve coming down. They are the exact same thing. What happens is the top set of graphs are expressed in a linear format, no weighting at all, and the bottom set of curves are when you apply the A-weighting filter, which wipes out the low frequency noise. And so if you come along and measure dBA, you actually don't measure the low frequency noise that's emitted from wind farms. That's the difference. Next. This is, again, a turbine. There's no turbines in Victoria included in any of this stuff. This is a turbine in New South Wales. This is 750 metres from it. And what it's saying is that you can convert the noise level to a power level. Again, the top graph is when you express in linear. The bottom graph is expressing the same material but weighted under that blue curve, which was about the 4th slide. If you can, those with photographic memories will remember the blue curve, and that's what's done to the slide. Next one. This actually is some measurements that relate to turbines in South Australia. And the opportunity that I had was to actually go to the public road, so I wasn't trespassing. I went to a public road in between and alongside a wind farm, and I could be 130 metres from the base of the turbine. I could do simultaneous measurements with some pretty fancy gear, and I could measure in front, to the side, and to the rear. And I was 130 metres from the base in each of these places, so to the centre of the turbine about a slant distance of 150 metres. And this is the way that they describe a power level. A power level, for those, and most of the people will remember, you used to buy proper light bulbs called incandescent in 60 watt, 75, 100 watt. And that is a way of expressing the light bulb in a power energy, and you knew that a 100 watt light bulb was a lot brighter than a 25 watt bulb. And this is a way of expressing noise by using power levels, and it's number crunching for acousticians. They enjoy it, you don't understand it, but call it a light bulb. Next. Okay, these are actually houses that now, if we get away from the dBA and we start looking at the frequencies, these are linear, not A-weighted. And these are measurements in terms of houses that are 2.5 kilometres away from turbines at capital. And what we have is that on the left-hand side, it's external, and on the right-hand side is internal. These measurements are the standard 10-minute measurements. They're both taken simultaneously. One microphone inside, one microphone outside, coming together into a processor, and this looks at the numbers. And what it does is it breaks the numbers. From the left-hand side is the bass, up to the right-hand side of the treble. And what shows is that outside, you've got a pretty broad sort of spectrum. But inside the house, there are a number of peaks. And those peaks occur in the spectrum, and I need to go sorry for the microphone, about there is where infrasound starts. Infrasound is normally taken at less than 20 hertz. So in this graph, there are some pictures, those two distinct peaks, which are in the audible frequency range, and you could sit in this woman's bedroom and hear the noise, and hear clear tones coming from the Woodlawn wind farm. Okay? Nothing from around here, New South Wales. So it's their data. The stuff that's to the left of where I talked about is some low frequency noise that was existing inside the house. The two bottom graphs are now moving into a different way of presenting the noise, which looks at it in a linear concept, an equal spacing of frequencies. And what it allows us to do is look at just a limited band, and it shows again the simultaneous measurements, and it points out the individual frequencies in very fine resolution that's occurring again inside this woman's bedroom. Next. Just that people say, well, how can you say that it's the wind farm? Well, within half an hour, maybe 25 minutes or something, but within half an hour of those measurements, these measurements were conducted 750 metres from the capital turbine. And what they show is the distinct pattern in the frequencies that occur at specific frequency rates in time. And it shows the general 25 hertz, and then the one on the right is looking at a spread of those to show different frequencies. Because sometimes when you can mix signals together, they add and subtract, and those into electronics will understand things called amplitude modulation and frequency modulation, where you add two signals together and you'll get 4 outputs. It's a bit like a committee meeting, put 4 people and get 5 outputs. But in adding frequencies together, you can put 2 frequencies and actually get 4 frequencies out. Those who understand AM radio, like the ABC or something, their frequency is their carrier, and then their audio signal modulates on it. And this is a thing that's called modulation. People that have messed with gearbox know that you get ghosting frequencies from different gears. Next. Okay, Lance referred to a report that talked about infrasound. This is the report that I've been able to find, and I assume that's the one he's talking about. And it's prepared in terms of infrasound, and it's dated November 2010. Next slide. Okay, this is out of that report, and it talks about the issue of presenting data to say this is what's occurring from different sources. He talked about there's a beach, there's a blowhole, there's a centre of Adelaide. Not quite sure how that relates to people out here, but it's there. And then it talks about some comparisons. Now, there's a green line on the graph, and I think it's important to point this out. The green line is the line that says people should be able to detect the sound. And all this is looking at is the frequencies that you can't hear. That's what infrasound is, all this low frequencies. There's also frequencies that you know at the upper end that you can't hear, that dogs can hear and bats. That's ultrasound. We're just dealing with infrasound. And so there's a curve that says when people are exposed to this level of infrasound, and they talk about very high levels, that's what people can hear. And so the question is, the levels that are shown in there are below the threshold of hearing. No bones about it, he's quite correct. They are below what you could hear. That is, that you can detect and understand. It doesn't mean that you're actually not hearing it. What happens is the ear is open all the time. Those that can remember having young children, you come home from the hospital, the mother's in bed, all asleep, and suddenly she hears a noise from the newborn. She's sound asleep, but she hears it. Father might be still sleeping, or sometimes it's the father's duty. Can anybody recall that situation? You are sound asleep, but suddenly you heard a sound. You know what? The ear does not stop. It's always there. It just calms down. Just as, luckily for most of us, the heart keeps going and the brain keeps going. They just slow down, but the ear is always there. So is there a question about what the ear is hearing and still getting, but not necessarily what it hears? Next slide. Okay, this is the same report that Lance was talking about, because I actually went there today. I've got something here from locality. This is the report. I found this interesting. This is the best, I'm sorry for the resolution, but this is the best I could get out of the report. On the left-hand side is the cul-de-sac for the blowhole, and it says a yellow dot that that's where the measurement was taken. Over to the right, it's indicated turbine 27, the first yellow dot, and that's what that map indicates. The report says the measurements were done in June 2010. Next slide. That's today standing at the yellow dot looking north. There seems to be a few more turbines than in the previous picture. Next slide. This is actually what Google says was in existence on the 25th of 3rd, 2010. That's what they say was there. I understand that the turbines were operating since about 2008. So the question is whether the data that's been attributed to the blowhole is the blowhole, or whether it includes some turbines, because the report doesn't say. It doesn't say what the wind was doing, it doesn't say what the turbines were doing, it doesn't say what direction or anything like that. But there's something not quite right there. And I went to look at the beach, but it was really blowing the clappers today, so I didn't do the measurements there. And I had a little bit of trouble of trying to find out where there's a house 25 metres from the beach. Or again, what's the weather. All I could do today was just measure wind. There weren't any turbines there, but all I could do was measure wind. So it sort of really didn't help me. Next slide. Okay, there's a difference in the noise that comes out of the turbine. I'm going to go through these quickly. This is Waterloo. Vestas 3 megawatt turbines. This is to the front, 130 metres from the base. Next one. To the side. Both of these graphs show that to the left of 20 hertz there is infrasound generated from the turbines. Now, the South Australian guidelines have a quote to say that there is no infrasound in a well-maintained wind farm. I expect the wind farm is well maintained, but there is infrasound that's generated. In the SONUS report that Lance talked to earlier, it actually confirms that infrasound is generated by wind farms. And it says that it's not a level that's up at that perceptible level of the green line. Don't have a problem. I agree with that. Completely. Next. House near Waterloo. It was the house that was in the Channel 7 show that occurred. These are measurements. Now, first off, the bedroom, this is the outside measurement, 15 metres from the house, and they were really just ticking over, and there are frequency patterns. Next one, please. This is inside the house. This is in the bedroom. Nothing on in the bedroom, no people in the bedroom. There's no noise from any fridges or anything like that. They're a long way away from the bedroom. Covered all those bases. There is noise inside the bedroom. No ticking clocks. Electric blankets were turned off. The alarm was turned off. There was nothing operating in that bedroom. This was the noise. Next. Compare both of them. And this is noise inside and outside simultaneously. And yes, the infrasound measured inside the house was higher than the infrasound measured outside the house 15 metres away. How is that occurring? Could be the building elements. Could also be as you get close to the building, you get a higher level. But in the comparison of these two locations, it is noisier in the low frequency than inside than outside, and higher in the infrasound inside than outside. The residents said they had a disturbed sleep that night. That's all they can tell me. This is data. Next. Waterloo turbines. This is the narrow spectrum to show that there's some of these patterns. Next. Turbines to the side. This is audible frequencies. Next. Okay. This graph is entirely infrasound. It's less than 12.5 hertz, and this is the narrow band that's occurring from a Waterloo turbine at 130 metres from the base. And what happens is they're a pattern. Technically, the first peak on the left-hand side should be 10 dB higher because the microphone drops off, but this is the raw data. If you take that and do multiples, you'll get the blade pass frequency plus the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth harmonics. They're all multiples that are occurring. This is a signature that is occurring from the turbines. Next. This is outside. See the patterns on the left-hand side? The peaks line up exactly with what's occurring at the turbine. Over here to the left of 4, the infrasound peaks have the same peaks in them as what's on the turbines. This has happened, this has been measured at Culleran, Woodlawn, it's measured at Hallett, it's measured at Waterloo, and it's measured at Capital. You get these patterns that exist. Next. This is inside and it has the same discrete frequencies. Natural sound, in terms of waves, beats, wind, doesn't have these discrete frequencies. They have infrasound, but the way that you do it is if you put it in 1/3 octaves, I described it as measuring the colour yellow. If you take light and put it through a prism, you get all the colours of the rainbow. If you just took the yellow and did that as a broad colour, that's a colour. But if you were sent down the paint shop to get paint for the kids' room, how many yellows are there? You know, there's a mustard yellow, a lemon yellow, there's probably a lime yellow, a sick yellow. I don't know if they call it vomit, but anyway, there's all these yellows. Now what this pattern is doing is giving, in the bands, is giving you the individual components of the yellows, whereas in the 1/3 octaves, you just get yellow. So there's a bulk of yellow, and then there's the individual colours that are broken down. And you can do this with all the different colours. You just go to the colour chart. Look how many there are in the hardware shop. This sort of thing happens in sound, and so it's a matter of what you present, because what I'm trying to do is find out if there is a problem. I've been to lots of houses. The generosity of country people is fantastic. It is really good, and it's great to be an Australian and get this. But I've been there and I spent hours and said what's going on. And I get people to say they walk in the house, they can't stand it. Okay? They can't live there anymore. I've heard all that. I've had other people say, I don't know what you're on about, because I'm here in the one family. I've seen disputes in the family. I've seen this thing. My job is to just do some measurements. But what has been interesting is that there's a number of communities that have experienced periods of time when the turbines have been off at night. And they have had no problem sleeping, or they go away. This is what they tell me. I'm not there doing measurements to see what it is. This is what they tell me. And so I've been trying to look to see if there's something that's occurring in there that might assist in understanding this problem or the complaints. When I first started off, I said my job is to look at complaints, and I'm trying to get some data to tell me what's happening. Next slide. This, so some residents actually this is Hallett, again in South Australia, nothing down here. They actually, a number of people in the community that I went to do measurements, they were telling me that for a while their sleep was returned to normal and they didn't know what was going on. And the gossip chain in the area, they suddenly found out the turbines had been off for some reason at night they didn't know. And they had an understanding, and then they suddenly, a little while later, they were getting disturbed sleep, and the gossip chain told them that the turbines had started back up again. Now, I'm not there, I didn't do the measurements, I'm just telling you these are the stories. I guess Lance has heard these, the senators have heard this, they've met with people. There's variations. Some of the variations that can occur is in terms of the weather. Down here for Victoria, it seems that you've got a lot of turbines which are on reasonably similar terrain. In New South Wales and South Australia, they have a lot of turbines which are sitting up on hills. And therefore, they can get updrafts of the wind, change the propagation, travels various distances. They get different atmospheric conditions. This is actually a photo of a house which is at Hallett, and you can see some silos in the circle in the red. Now, this is across the valley, and this is 4 kilometres away from the turbines. You can hear them. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning. Not as cold as down here, I might add. I've still got my thermal underwear on from coming here. But this is a picture. There was wind blowing across the valley, and this is cloud coming across the hill. Next slide, please. Okay. This is now just a zoom, and where the yellow is, if you can see it, is actually a turbine sitting on top of the hill operating. And they've circled the silos, and underneath there to the left of the silos is a guy's house. Now, somebody else was doing measurements there, not me, and said that they had a fair bit of noise. I was across the valley, so I didn't have that much. So what has happened is that there's an issue that says some people complain and some people don't. Okay, that's what you get. They're told that they satisfy the DBA level, but they're getting sleep disturbance and some people can't go near their properties. So DBA is not the answer to it. And so we've got regulations that are written around DBA and we've got a problem there, and so we need to look at it. There's some issues that say for these people that they're complaining about some low frequency. I've proven in terms of measurements that there's information there. Now, I can't do the linking because I'm only qualified to do the measurements. However, I am qualified that I can tell you I've got a brain, and I know I've got a brain because I had an accident 4 years ago, and I damaged that brain, and I've had brain scans. And I actually have found out what my brain is operating at. And what I found out is that when you're awake at a certain frequency, when you're agitated and stressed, it increases in frequency, and when you go to sleep, the frequency drops. The brain is not at a constant frequency. Whether these frequencies are interfering with the operation of the brain, I don't know. I'm not qualified. I'm just the first cog in the chain of seeing what's happening. There are some people that say that it causes an issue and it may be affecting sleep patterns. But some people are saying they wake up in a startled state, they don't know what's going on, and others will sleep through. If you heard my wife snoring, sometimes I can't sleep when I have to get up, but she doesn't wake herself up with the snoring. I don't know if anybody else gets that. Not my wife, but I mean snoring. These things happen. So I just simply gone off to look at it. And I'm asked sometimes, what does it mean? Well, it means that there may be an impact, and there's work that needs to be done. And if we can overcome the potential or perceived or real health issues, then if that's a matter like a separation distance, find out what it is and go for your life and build wind farms. Right? Have no problems about it. Now, if the nearest residence was 100 kilometres away from a wind farm, we know they're not going to have a problem. Now, that's being silly. But there are a lot of people that are a kilometre from a wind farm and having problems. And that also might be silly. Now, somewhere in between seems to be an answer that you have it, that it doesn't present a problem. Where that's somewhere in between, too early for me to give an answer. But there are people that are getting effects, and sometimes the topography, the atmosphere affects the number of turbines, how they're operating. Of course, the wind direction and the strength, it all changes. And so we need more work to get to the bottom of what's going on so that people can use wind farms. No problems about that. We've just got to make sure that, they say we have to prove that there's causing a problem, and there's other people that need to look at that. But if there is a problem, then we have to see about fixing it. There are some issues there. There are things like tones and that occur. People know about bad gearboxes, bearings that go, and different types of gearboxes, and some companies have changed them to get rid of tones that are more annoying. Those of you that have been in a room and the teachers ran the chalk down the wall and the board and get that screeching sound, well, that's a tone. It's interesting, if you measure the tone by way of some of the EPA methods, like the one in New South Wales, I actually proved to a person that their dog barking wasn't tonal by the methodology. So it wasn't a distinct characteristic that would say it would be more annoying than, you can call out all the mother-in-law jokes, but it wasn't tonal. So we have a new noise that exists, that's come into being, and maybe it needs to be looked at differently to see what's going on. And then when we've got an answer, then we can have a solution to either a problem or a perceived problem. That's all I've done to try and investigate and provide some input to the debate about what's going on with wind farms. Thank you.
Or is everything you're talking about so far being airborne noise? In other words, were you able to do a time correlation between what you were measuring outside a house and what you were measuring inside a house?
Okay. Good question. At one house I went to, I said, there's a way of looking to see whether things are occurring in a room, and that's to put a glass of water on the table. Look at the side of the glass, and you'll see the high frequencies in the water. And look at the top of it and see the ripples, that's low frequency. The resident said, we don't need a glass, we just go and look at our toilet. And we can see it going up and down. I have endeavoured to conduct some vibration measurements in some buildings, and I have been unsuccessful in finding any ground-borne vibration. I've now got a more sophisticated measuring system that's supposed to measure an ant walking up a hill. That's only 1 metre away from the hill. But I get problems with 50 hertz mains in buildings and that. I haven't done things like sound power to see what the intensity is, because the bulk of this work that I've done is completely unpaid for. My wife is screaming about our mortgage. She's not exactly happy that I'm here. So I haven't had any funding to go and look at the work in terms of it. I did a similar exercise though in terms of railway wagons in the Hunter Valley. And I did the exact thing that they have these trains which are 4 kilometres long. And these wagons make houses shake. And I had a number of houses to test. And what I did is I put vibration detectors on the ground, vibration detectors on the building, microphones in the building and microphones outside. And so what would happen is if it was ground-borne vibration, it would arrive before the airborne because it travels faster. And in all cases I proved that it was airborne vibration, and what was happening is the wagons were resonating at 23 hertz when they were in a speed range between 40 and 55 kilometres. So they controlled the speed of the trains going past various houses. Although one house I was at, what the guy did is they found that the radio network, when they knew we were out, all the trains said it was there and they slowed down amazingly. So what he did is he went and made out some timber cutouts of me and my guys doing measurements, and then some nights he put it out in his front yard with a light, and it said it was amazing the train stopped. But I've tried that. So far I haven't found the vibration yet. There was a big issue in the UK about vibration for their seismic laboratory, and they found problems that were coming out of the base. There are some issues that some of the turbines have had the foundation base too small because it's been a foundation for a smaller turbine. And then what happens, instead of the base being an inertia block, it becomes an amplification. Now, I haven't been to any turbines. I haven't been asked, nor have I tried to trespass to get to look at them. It's a valid question. So far, I haven't found anything. I found that it's been an airborne noise, and what I've been doing is I've been doing simultaneous measurements, and I'm measuring down to 0.63 hertz, and I'm measuring inside and outside at the same time. I have been looking at some cross-correlation, and I have been finding it's airborne noise.
What they're calling a development plan amendment, interim development plan amendment. No disrespect, noises, whatever else is just burfies, it's red herrings. We have a state government that has removed the democratic right to oppose, to develop the development applications, so councils don't have a say, adjacent landholders don't have a say. Your land values will drop, you cannot develop on your own property. I'm asking you as representative of Pacific Hydro, you have lawyers coming out of your kazoo. Have your lawyers said to you, this is fascist legislation that this government's handed down? And it's not, I'm not being alarmist or dramatic. When the government legislates to remove a democratic right, that is a dictionary definition of fascism. And we're sick of it in South Australia. As far as we're concerned, the hydro companies, the renewable energies, the Clean Energy Council of Australia, who was spied on the last meeting in Mount Gambier. I have a letter here where the lady wrote into the paper and said, I went to that meeting and all these troublemakers who fly around the country, which is what you were referring to at the start, we've had a gutful. Pacific Hydro comes to South Australia builds turbines under the current legislation, the first person that gets moved out of their house because they can't live there, the first application for development gets knocked back. I'm not talking about all the birds that get slaughtered, not talking about the neighbours who can't sleep in their own houses. I'm talking about the legislation. You people in Victoria, no disrespect to any of you, but you've got no idea. Our state government has said you're having these and you're having them from the border across to the west coast. Okay, so I'm sorry to be disrespectful coming here and cut crook. No disrespect to Mr. Cooper, you clearly know what we're talking about. No disrespect to you, good on you for showing up. But in South Australia, we have no rights. We have less rights than our cattle because our state government has taken away our democratic right to oppose wind turbine development. I'd be very, very closely watching what your state government does and your councils, because the exact same legislation has just been handed down in Germany, for God's sake, where now people have no right to oppose wind turbine legislation. That's all I've got to say.
Look, I absolutely agree with your concern. We're actually on record as saying that we don't agree with the South Australian government, and I said it on radio about a month ago. I don't think you're quite correct in what you're saying. There was always the ability to oppose a wind farm planning application. What the state government are talking about is removing the appeal right. And you're quite right, that is unfair, and that is not. Sorry, if I could just finish. And I agree that is not acceptable. And we've said on radio that we think that should not be part of the new legislation. And I'll be very surprised if the South Australian government actually passed that legislation.
Right, they call it interim, it's already in play. We've just had 153 turbines approved at Millicent that nobody can oppose. What you've just said is absolutely wrong. An adjacent landholder, not anybody else outside of the person where the turbine is going and the developer, if it's a kilometre away from somebody's house, you've got no say. You can't oppose it, you can't put an opinion, you've got nothing. Your democratic right has been removed. It gets approved, you can then chase it through the courts, and if you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, you're up against people like the Clean Energy Council who represent 600 companies. What chance you got?
Have a proposed or a wind tower farm by Acciona, which has just been granted its permit under the old guidelines. That original permit was put up, or that proposal was put up, and it was a very one-sided proposal. It was planned by a panel of experts, but the people who had to protest were lay people, and their voice laid in the wilderness. That permit went through under the old guidelines back in March, April this year. It has reduced the turbines, but bigger. But when we ask departments, please listen to us. This is a beautiful landscape here. We have Brolgas. It is the pathway to the Ramsar wetlands and all the other habitats there. It is fallen on deaf ears. When we have tried to speak to DSE, they say their hands are tied. They can't do anything about it. Now, I'm not the only person here who has experienced that. Have you ever gone to DSE or those other departments? Are you falling on deaf ears because it's got out of hand? I'm sorry.
Alan Schaefer's my name. I come from Berrybank, which is, if you're not familiar, is about halfway, or not, a bit further than halfway between here and Geelong. We've got 100, Ian and I have got 100 acres there, and I want to be self-indulgent if I can for a little while and just excuse that. Our house is 870 metres from the nearest turbine which is proposed, 99 of them going around our district. 16 turbines will be within 2 kilometres of our house, 70 will be within 4 kilometres of our house on a 270 degree radius. So take 90 degrees out of that 360 and that's where they're turning around us. We've been to a panel hearing. I've tried to speak to Minister Guy. I've tried to speak to Minister Madden. I have spoken to ex-Premier Brumby. Anne and I have bent over backwards. I'm semi-retired from an earth-moving business. We've both bent over backwards to try and get someone to listen to our concerns. Like Steve was saying earlier, there are contour lines around the turbines which determine the decibel reading of those turbines and how they're going to impact on our house. We are over the limit. Over the limit. I'm trying to tell I've been to a panel and told them that we're over the limit. I didn't do the figures. Their own acoustic people did the figures. We're over the bloody limit. It's still going ahead. Union Fenosa have never held a public meeting in our area, not once. The local council has called for it. I've had 2 meetings with the project engineer. I've had 1 meeting with their lawyer. His last comment as he walked out the door was, "We've got the permit." I'm not against wind farms, but I don't think they should impact on people. We've taken a great interest on whether there is a problem because we hear of all these NIMBYs and people who are pissed off because they're not getting money for it like their neighbours are who are hosting the turbines. I can understand all that. I've been to Warborough, we've been to Warborough. I've heard a noise coming out of 2 turbines in line with each other which thumps in my chest. I wouldn't be able to sleep there at night. The people have moved out of their house. I've been to Tour, I've seen the foundations where a bulldozer's gone through and knocked houses over. There is a problem. Please, government, do something about it. Please research it. Thank you.
I come from just south of Glen Thompson. Back last September, AGL started a wind farm next to our place, about 1.6, 1.7 kilometres. The nearest one from our house. Oh God. Can you hear me better if I just look forward? Yeah. You're right. I'll just look like this so you know which way to look. On the first full day of their operation, my wife had trouble. We definitely knew there was trouble, within days. It took us about a month to find another house to live in. So, yes, we did spend some nights in a tent. Now that we live away from the farm, I only go there to work, you can notice that, the noise, as in dBA, as Mr. Cooper says, is not loud. I have a very cheap noise meter, and it doesn't measure very low, and we definitely can have problems there when you can't even measure the noise outside. That cheap meter has C weighting. On the bad days, you can have circumstances when there's very little wind at the house. So I agree, when there's a lot of wind right next to you in trees, which is where I'll come to a question to you, yes, the noise meter goes crazy. But if it's calm, or near calm, and you're getting C-weighted measurements approaching 110 dBc, that is the sort of thing that we're getting on our worst day, and yet, yeah, you can hear the noise, but it isn't extra loud. In fact, if you took minimum levels, this doesn't take a low 95, you'd be flat out to be above 40. But I can assure you it's rather extreme. And without instruments, what I've noticed is, okay, you go close to the turbine, and there's not a lot of noise. And yet, during our approval, there was information given that said next to the turbine body there was 107 dB. I think it was dBA. So how come it isn't very noisy out 100, 200 metres from that turbine when there's as much noise as you'd expect from a chainsaw with a 4 silencer on an 80 metre tower, and then as you move away, you find even into the wind, we can hear most of the time the turbines when they're operating fully at the house into a wind, which to me would indicate that there's something as strong as a sound wave from a shotgun to be able to hear at that distance. Another feature that I've noticed is, okay, after a while the turbines start to sound louder. We've had to remove ourselves because it gets very uncomfortable, and even after a day's work and that there, you definitely feel rather bad. As you move away, yes, we can go away from the turbines. All noises seem louder, what they would appear by the noise meter. So something is happening to you. And yeah, a lot of people here. And okay, Mr. Cooper, you might be able to put that question, and I'll rephrase that, because I'd like to know the difference between a sound wave and pressure differences that you can record with these cheap meters near trees. You know, are they all the same? Should they be treated the same? Yeah, there definitely are things going on that wouldn't be going on under normal circumstances once you get turbines there, and it does affect you. So,
would you like Steve to answer that?
yeah, it's about the difference between pressure differences and sound waves, and whether you can measure it with one microphone or anything like that.
Sound level meters, in that the microphone isn't that efficient. If, for example, in Imperial, which is the proper way of doing measurements, if you use a 1-inch microphone, you have to be very careful about where you're pointing it because it has directional characteristics. In the more expensive microphones, they have a special diffuser so as to give you a random incidence from all different directions. In the smaller microphones that I use in the professional one, they actually have a solid piece in the front so as to stop the noise coming in directly and get the bit round the side. So in some cases, if you've got a 1-inch microphone, it's very directional. The next thing is that if there's wind occurring, the microphone is actually measuring pressure waves. It's all that you're hearing differences in pressure wave. The meter will measure pressure waves, and so the issue becomes is the meter measuring the noise or measuring the wind? So what they normally do is that they have a rubber foam, which is a wind screen, to drop off the low frequency wind noise to protect it. And as the wind increases, so does the foam have to increase. One of the ways that we've done for long-term monitoring is we've got a bird cage, and we've covered it with the cloth that, see on the fuzzy cloth on for the camera, there's like a fur above the microphone at the front. It's not a rubber. If you look at the film industry, they have some pretty good ideas. And you can get this cloth that you can cover over the bird cage, put the microphone inside, and you have no problems measuring up to 25 kilometre an hour winds. It's just bulky and it won't fit in my luggage to bring on a plane. Okay, now, the issue is, if I can use a light bulb approach for the moment, if we have a single old-fashioned incandescent light, none of these silly halogen things, when the light's hanging and there's no shade, it emits the light in all different directions. And so in terms of noise, we'll call that as a point source. If we now put a shade over the light, what it does is it obviously reduces the light going up and concentrates the light going down. So therefore, sound can also have like shades on it to give a directivity. If you're doing industrial noise measurements, you're doing motors, or you're even doing an entire factory. If you're doing a large plant, and I've had to do a plant which is about 800 square metres, is an industrial plant. And the way that you do it is you find the acoustic centre and you put a microphone at that height and you go right round the plant to determine this energy, this sound power. Seems to me that the acoustic centre of a turbine is sitting up where the hub is. So if you're measuring at the ground and you've got a very acute angle, you may very well be in a shade, in the lampshade, so what you're measuring at the ground is not necessarily what is occurring. Because if we now imagine that instead of it being a light, the noise source has a shade on it, because if you measure the side, the front and the back, they're different. I had the data to show that the noise spectrum, the noise levels, the character is different. Now that's measuring at ground level, so there must be some directivity effects. So if you start measuring 80 metres, the hub height centre above the ground, and do it around the turbine, then you'll have the noise that's generated up there. And one of the questions is whether dynamically it's a cone and it becomes a funnel. And so if it's a cone, just like the light shade, we can direct the sound, then how that affects going far out versus measuring close is a totally different scenario. The next thing that you have, sorry you asked the question, but what happens is that you have all these different frequencies, and the high frequencies fall off, that they rapidly attenuate more than the low frequencies. When aircraft are flying over, you don't hear actually the high frequency whistle of the jets that you'll hear at the airport, because the high frequency has dropped off. And so what happens is the high frequency drops off, and what people hear when they're far away from turbines, when they're far away from factories, they will hear more of the low frequency noise. So a lot of people describe the noise of a wind farm like that rotten propeller aircraft that never takes off or never lands. And they get this constant drone, but they're describing a sound which is a mid sort of low frequency. And that's what some people down at Waterloo, who are 10 kilometres away from the turbines, under certain conditions, they hear them. Now they describe as the turbines being next door. That's not quite right, but they hear this noise and they haven't heard it before. So it's not a noise that they're used to, it's not a natural noise, it's a different noise. It's just like if somebody starts singing opera, I won't like it, I like opera, even if they are in tune, I find it irritating and I want to go away. So there's likes and dislikes. So the whole thing about how it attenuates, in actual fact there's work that I did on aircraft that proved the international standards for atmospheric attenuation are wrong. And I did testing by using an F111 and prove it, and found that working backwards the formula was wrong. And that's been accepted both here in Australia, New Zealand and America, and they're looking at changing that standard. I proved there were problems with lateral attenuation, and in 2003 they accepted it. In 2006 they changed the computer model that's used right around the world for noise footprints of airports on the work that I showed them that was wrong. The reason being, and this is very important, the way they assessed it originally, they measured the aircraft flying overhead at one point and they predicted the noise levels to produce these curves. I went out and measured the rotten things and I couldn't get what they predicted. And I did the testing and I proved that it was wrong. I went over to the Aircraft Standards Committee in America, by the way unpaid, nobody paid me, I went there yet again, proved it. A 20-minute paper was an hour and a half with questions from the committee. They agreed, they looked at the data, they said it was right. I went back and looked at it historically. That's the mindset that I have. It really bugs some people, but I get in to see what's going on and I go back to see historically what's occurred, look at the data, see what assumptions have been made, how it works out. I don't have the answer, but that's part of the answer to your question. Can that suffice for the moment?
Yeah, well, it was a funny sort of a question I put in the statement, I'll admit, but I'm one of those people that's also looking because I know we've got a problem and we don't seem to be able to give the technical data to prove to a lot of others that there is a problem, because they just go, they pull up in a car near the turbines, they say, not much noise here, big deal.
Okay, I was asked a question today, not down here at a different wind farm. The person is affected by a wind farm and they're looking to move and rebuild the house. And said, can you tell us if the house is okay? And I said, how am I going to know? I haven't even been there yet. But can you hear it up there? And they said, oh, sort of. And I said, now, when you're outside the house and when you're inside the house, there's a difference in the sound, isn't there? They said, yes. So I said, how are you going to relate that to the new site? Because what you hear outside is not what you're going to hear inside. Because the problem that occurs is that if you go outside tonight, you'll see all these stars, and they're there. If you go out tomorrow in the day, you won't see the stars because the sun is masking it, but the stars are still there. So you have a masking effect. If we had the noise outside and we go inside and the building attenuates the high frequency, we change the balance. And so the low frequencies stand out more because the high frequencies disappear. That's what all the data says. People that do building insulation know that. Aircraft noise problems, if you've got to do international jets and departures and that, all you've got to do is worry about 125 hertz. Solve that to the Australian standard, which is a committee that I'm on, and you solve everything in dBA. So you have to find the frequencies that are causing the problem. And so I said, well, if you've got a caravan, go up there and put the caravan and sit inside and read your book, your newspaper, and see what it's like. That'll be better than sitting outside.
They're done as a spot test out in the paddock with the recording device. Now, when we're out away from the house, can hear, well, virtually nothing from the turbines when the wind's blowing towards us. But if we stand beside the house, we get quite a marked increase in sound. And if we open the window inside the house and listen to that noise that's being accumulated at the wall, we couldn't sleep in it, even though the turbines are 1.75 megs and they're 2.5 kilometres away from the house. But the noise is significantly increased by having the wall there as a reflector. Can you comment on that?
Okay, an exercise for the people in the audience. It's not stand up and shake around. Can you put this back here? Okay, first off, listening to my monotonous voice that's been going on, I'd like you to put all your hands behind your ears and to be able to listen to the difference in my voice and have it flat so it's like a cup. Does the sound of my voice change? Still might be terrible, but you hear a difference. Now, what I want you to do is, in answering that saying yes, you can do a yes and a no. Do yes with the hands behind to listen to your own voice, then say no with your hands down. Please do that.
Yes.
Hear a difference? Please. Did anybody not hear? Who didn't hear a difference? Need a hearing aid turned up. Okay, so what happens is you get a reflecting sound. If I listen to what's going on in the room, and as I listen to the noise and I move against the wall, the room will sound different because I'm getting a reflection. So what happens is that I've had people at some of these complainants that I went there and they were telling me, and they took me to a spot and I stood there and they said, it's worse here, and they went down a path. And I said, of course it is. It's the noise coming from there, it's hitting the back of the building, it's bouncing off, so it's adding to it, so that's the reflection that you hear. When they do road traffic noise, nothing to do with turbines, they actually measure the noise in the field, then they add 2.5 dB to account for the facade reflection. That's standard throughout all Australia for doing road traffic noise assessments. I get paid when I do those. Did that answer the question? Oh, sorry, there was another part that you made a statement earlier. Currently, the way that they work the noise levels out as a prior to the wind farm, the proposal, was that graph I showed ages ago that had all the blue dots. What they do is that they say you do a minimum of 2 weeks of data. Now, at the capital one that I keep on talking about, because I've been hammered about their doing measurements there, but that's the residence that I went to, what happened was that they did a compliance test that appears on the New South Wales Department of Planning website. They actually found that when they turned the turbines off in the middle of the test, to measure the turbines on and the turbines off, the background level with the turbines off was lower than the regression analysis that they did for the analysis. Therefore, it means build a wind farm and it sucks the noise out. No, it meant that the data was wrong. So if you're relying upon, and this is important for all the applicants, if you're relying upon getting this thing right and getting your data, and you're only doing 2 weeks of data, then that's a fair bit of a risk for the investment. You really need to get longer data. You also need to know what is the noise level when the wind's blowing that way and what's the noise level when the wind's blowing that way, because the predictions will change. And so you need to be able to say in an industry, right, just take a factory that you've got to do in New South Wales, we have to determine neutral weather conditions. We have to determine a temperature inversion and then a temperature inversion with a light wind blowing from source to receiver. And that's the assessment you do because you're trying to satisfy it for 90% of the time. Right? Totally different state, but that's the way they do it. They actually don't do it for wind farms in their draft guidelines. So they have one method to look for the rest of the state and another method for wind farms. Now I did a review of their guidelines, and it's on the web, and there are only 2 other acousticians that commented, but I did it by trying to do a compliance test, and I found these problems. And I've done the compliance test using the methodology that I've done for large-scale industrial projects. At one point in time, I was responsible for the largest industrial complex in Australia, the ICI Botany Complex. And I had the complete authority for what it is. It was a noise reduction program that took 35 years to do. I didn't start at the beginning, but I came not far after it, and it was successfully completed. That became Chapter 10 of the New South Wales Industrial Noise Policy for addressing industrial premises. It's my scheme, the way I did it, it's been enacted, and say how you do the thing. So it comes from some understanding about propagation, what you do, how you assess it, showing how the standards work or not work. I'm a bit sort of weird in some of those areas, but that's what's occurred.
Yes, you sir, and then you.
Wind tower fabrication out the road here. What I'd like to do is say that I'm representing myself, not them as such. My heartfelt interest in renewable energies happened before I joined them, but it certainly was one of the part. I took a job there, and I see it as a great responsible part of the community's effort to try and get on top of renewable energy and get rid of some of the other dirtier methods for getting the power to your houses. I've researched myself a lot of the claims, a lot of the allegations about wind farms with an open mind, I'd like to think. And the 20 or so worldwide studies I've seen have totally refuted any scientific-based evidence that's been had peer feedback and is accepted by the scientific people of evidence that it causes people illness. And I understand people get ill. No doubt some people get ill, but in any community...
Scientists explain that?
Well, can I just finish this? People in a demographic across a community, people get ill. Doctors will see people get headaches, people get whatever, and there's many people in the community. All these worldwide studies in Holland, in Germany, and all over the place where they have hundreds and thousands of these things, they don't have this issue.
Yes, they do.
Where is the scientific evidence? That's my question. Where's the scientific evidence? Can I finish up?
Please, give a chance.
Everyone else has had a chance to speak uninterrupted. Please give this gentleman the same courtesy.
I appreciate Mr. Cooper's graphs and all the bits and pieces, and I find, probably as many of us, a bit hard to understand all those bits and pieces. Appreciate that stuff. What I don't see is the link. Where is the evidence that says, hey, this makes you crook, and here's the doctors, or many doctors, many scientists' signature on the bottom of that that say, yep, we believe this, because at the moment it's not out there. Yep, there's anecdotal evidence, there's people who say, I get crook, but there isn't the evidence there prove scientifically that it happens.
Their homes, their properties, if they don't have it. Where are they going to live? I haven't left my home. I'm a kilometre from a wind tower. I haven't had to. I'm not affected because of the wind direction. But friends of mine have had to leave their properties. And it's very upsetting to see it all happening. I appreciate what you've spoken about tonight. It's difficult for a lot of people to understand the scientific reasoning behind the audiology.
What about the psychological?
I just would like to know socially, how do we deal with the people who are going to be leaving their properties?
Could you answer the first question first before you answer the second question here that was just interrupted?
Okay. I'll actually just put a comment for the second one because it leads to the first. I'm just a noise guy. That's all I do. I'm not a sociologist. I'm I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a sleep investigator.
No, it's directly important to the
And so if I just come back to the question, you've got a very, very valid point. I've researched myself to try and find what's been going on. And I have found that most of the studies and the peer reviews are just simply literature reviews. There has been an absolute absence of actual measurement data to say what's going on. There are a few people around the world who have been doing independent investigations and have been slammed and slandered and all sorts of things and labelled anti-wind farm when they have gone in to do the same exercise that I've done and they've provided the data. Can we get that up at all? And so what happens is you get this argument about the no studies. And I've been asked to talk about this. And the issue is that the only way that you can put the relationship together of the impact is a multidisciplinary approach. The first cab off the rank is getting the data for what's happening. And I'm just a piece of a jigsaw. What you need to do is then to have somebody that looks at the sleep studies. You need to have somebody that looks at the brain waves. You need to have somebody that looks at the stress effects or the health effects. Look at the blood analysis. There may be other people, but you need that group of people. I am not qualified to talk about anything except the first bullet point. I'm at the top, but that's what I've done. Equally, a doctor cannot give you the link to say from the noise of the wind farm or the vibration all the way through, because they're not qualified to do that. So what is required is a multidisciplinary approach which involves the melding of those people to come together and then to give the answer, because there is no acoustician on this planet that can answer that question. If it is, they're a liar, because they can't do it, they're outside their expertise. And in actual fact, there's no doctor that can answer that question, and there's no sleep study, because it needs all of those things together to be able to answer it. And that's what we need to do. And all it is this is just the first cog, but it's a very valid question. And I've looked at what people have been doing, and I have seen so much plagiarism that has occurred in terms of theoretical documents and reviews. And I've covered people that have done, they've said in 1998, here's a major problem, we need to investigate it. Paper after paper after paper, they've changed their view, but there's not one measurement that they've done. And therefore, people just said, I had some people and said, we're going to have a wind farm around us. Can you please tell us whether we're going to be affected, we're going mad, and to believe what's happening? That's all we want to know. I said, I can't do that. All I can do is go and tell you if there's something there. That's all I can do. And there's a whole link that needs to occur. Hey, I'm not here to say what has to be, what it can be, the separation distance. All I'm saying is this is the start, and then if we find it, can we get the problems? There are people all around the world that are complaining. And I have, from some of the work that I've done and published about just New South Wales wind farming guidelines, I've got professors and academics overseas contacting me asking for the material. Because you know what? I'm the first person to go out and tell them, you guys are measuring the wrong thing in DVA. And I've given them the data. And I've got some very well respected people that are acknowledged in the documentation you would have found that have said, hey, you're onto something. We didn't realise it. And we're now going back to look at it. Now, Australians are world famous for innovative stuff. And, let's solve the problem. Everybody. Solve it. And as far as I'm concerned, if you can get it, go and build 1 million wind farms if they work and don't cause a problem. I'll be 100% there. If you can do it and you can find it's not causing a problem and the community is rest easy and sleep and they don't have to leave their homes and you can make the energy and all that sort of stuff, go for it. Because I have to apply the same thing when I do industry. If I look at it and says it's not going to comply with the regulations, or it's going to cause problems to people to be sick, we have a lot of problems with low frequencies, silencers, boilers, things like that. They require special treatment. But I am duty bound if there's a problem to tell my client. So if that answers the question, it's the best I can do, because I'm only just one bullet point there. And if I can say this right,
Yes, sir, I'm going. Senator Madigan was pointing out just before. It's only a couple of weeks to go, I think. About 2 weeks to go before the anniversary of those 7 recommendations from the Senate inquiry into wind farms. It was several months ago that Senator Madigan and Senator Xenophon got the Coalition and the Greens to side with them in calling on the government to act on those 7 recommendations for there. We've heard nothing back on that yet. We're still waiting for some action to be done, and this is what Steve's talking about. He can do his bit and other people can do other reports, but those 7 recommendations require those various people to be called upon to come out with their particular expertise. So hopefully this sort of thing can put the pressure on to get those recommendations fulfilled. Now, sorry, sir, you've been very patient.
Okay. My name's Peter Eaton. I also have a question for Steve Cooper. I should declare before I ask the question though that I'm very concerned of anthropogenic climate change, and I think that we should be doing all that we can to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. And I think that clean energy of large and small scales is a very important step into doing that. But I think it would be good if we could actually broaden the discussion to be more than acoustics, but I also expect that tonight is all about acoustics. So the question is...
Well, no, it was about wind farms. It's just they put me forward, that's all.
Wind farms we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
Okay. The question is, and it's a very objective question, even though, and that is, we have spoken briefly about the thousands of people that are already living with thousands more wind farms and wind turbines in places like Europe that have been doing it for far longer than what we have in Australia. And I'd like to ask Steve what his opinion of how that's been possible and what his opinion of those people that are living closer to the wind turbines. With respect to the people that are having issues, I know that there's been some issues here as well, but I'd just like to ask Steve's opinion on that, on the European situation.
Okay, I haven't been engaged to go there, but I have been told I may be. There have been different styles of wind turbines, and they've had the difference where first the turbines were in front of the tower and behind the tower, and they will tell you that there's differences in the noise signatures. We have 2 things which become interesting and from an acoustician's viewpoint. A lot of the towers that have been in Europe are smaller towers, and they don't have the large blades. And what happens is, as you go to the larger blades, the frequency shifts down. And it's well documented that as they bring online these larger towers, they are generating frequencies that are occurring lower down. Not above the green line that in the SONUS report, but they're still generating them. The other thing that we have is that a lot of turbines in Europe, a lot of them occur on flat ground. I mean, if you've ever been to Holland, there's no hills there. So what happens is that the people are in a certain wind zone which is reasonably similar to the turbines as to what they experience. A lot of the turbines that we have here in Australia are sitting up on hills. And what they can, and in some cases, and again this is outside my expertise, but I've had a wind person tell me that you get some convection currents that come like across Lake George, hit the hill and go up, so you actually get a wind that's hitting the blades at an oblique angle. So whether the wind that occurs hitting the blades on an oblique angle rather than straight on causes different dynamics across the blade. Because they talk about this blade pass frequency, whether it's on the downward swipe or whether it's coming across the tower. And there's a whole different opinions about amplitude modulation and what's causing it. It's there, it's not there. There's lots of papers where there's different opinions about how you measure it and what's occurring. So there's a question as to whether the dynamics on the turbines we have in Australia are different for the elevated positions. The next thing that occurs is that there was a guy from Holland, Vandenberg, who talked about different velocities from the top and the bottom, and he was talking about that changes different propagations. And so if we have our different stratas, where the turbines are versus where the residents are in the valley, they can be an entirely different noise propagation. And so I can't tell you about a freeway, but if you drive from Sydney to Newcastle and you go up this freeway, you look down on valleys on the side. And you can be driving in the morning and look down and see there's a cloud in the valley. And that cloud says that there's a fog or a temperature inversion. And it hasn't burned off because the sun hasn't come up. When you get a temperature inversion, it throws the sound down. So when you get frost in that you can get temperature inversion. It changes the propagation. Now, if you want to be about climate, if our climate's different to Europe and it propagates, then that's an answer. The second part is that they basically had a lot of smaller turbines. There are a lot of people coming out about the problems, and now what's happened in Denmark, the government is looking at bringing in a low frequency rule inside houses in a special curve. Well, it's DBA, but it's calculated to start looking at the low frequency. There are court cases that have occurred. There's things in UK and Canada that has had community reaction that's caused problems for wind farm operators. And in some cases, they have people a lot closer. That's as best I can answer the question for you. But happy to take a sponsored trip to go and look at the wind farms. I can't even get a sponsored trip to come down to Victoria, but...
So equally, the distance and the size is an issue. So a recommendation that you might make may be size, scale, compared to distance from a house then? Would that be reasonable?
Well, look, the problem is that it will change with the type of turbine. And some of the proposals that have been approved in New South Wales and South Australia, and I understand in Victoria, haven't even said what the turbine will be. They're yet to determine it. Maybe they're waiting for a few to fall off the back of a truck or something, I don't know. But no, seriously, there's still more work, and obviously they're trying to make the turbines quieter, and I think that's great. But the problem is that we actually don't have the social survey. Now, what the community has done around Waterloo is that they have conducted their own social survey. And they had questions and said, we're asking about noise and interference. Like all their TVs are affected, and they actually have to look at, they get satellite and they get to watch Alice Springs, which is really good when they're in South Australia. And they want to watch the Adelaide News. But they have all these issues. So what they've done is that the community sent a survey out to residents which were 10 kilometres from the turbine. And I understand, I haven't seen the results, but I understand that people sending out the survey were amazed at the response about people saying they're affected. And it was identified that you didn't say who you were, it just said you're in line A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and some people actually put their names and addresses on it. And they were trying to keep it independent. And there were people that didn't know what was happening. Now, obviously, if that proves a point, then it's likely that they get surveys around other wind farms, because until you get a cross-section of what the community's experiencing, perceived, real or otherwise, you don't know. And I was doing measurements at one house in South Australia, and I'd been doing the measurements for what I thought was the owner of the land. And when I was packing up after the second day to go, I got pulled up by his son and actually found it was his property. And he was annoyed because his father had protested against the wind farm and his business had been cut off in the valley. This family was divided. And I was sort of the meat in the sandwich and said, okay, but you guys have got to have serious conversation amongst yourselves. Now, we've got to try and get the communities together. And if we don't cause a problem, then we won't split the communities. Now, that's what I'm finding. I'm just a noise guy, but I'm finding it from talking to people.
I believe them more than that. Okay. We're from Millicent. We're in rather a unique situation. We live out in the country, but our council saw fit to have subdivided off 4 10-acre blocks. We're all side by side. The only aspect of those blocks that gives them any value is their aesthetics, their peace and quiet, their view. We have a gorgeous view. We overlook Sandhills, Lake Bonnie in the south. Now, the bit that troubles us, not the wind farm developer here, because we belong to Infogene Energy. The wind farm promoter went around and signed up all the farmers adjacent to our place before we were even told there was going to be a wind farm anywhere near the place. So we weren't given the opportunity to speak to these people or put our point of view to them and say, listen, look what you're doing to us. We were interviewed by TV this morning, and I made the comment on TV, it's on Wind SA, and this is true. If we were in the position of these farmers that have signed up, and we're going to have 17 turbines directly in front of our place, 2 to 3 kilometres away, on the upwind side of our property, and our house is built to face the side where the turbines are going. If we were in the position that those farmers were in, no matter how much, this is the morality of it, no matter how much those wind turbine promoters or developers had offered us, there is no way we would have taken up the offer. We could not have done to these people what they have done to us. Now, we live in a little close-knit rural community, and I'm sure most of you do, or many of you do. Now, own these farms that the wind turbines are going to be on. Many of them have sat at our table, looked out our windows and said, what a gorgeous view you've got. Those that don't live across the valley, across the flats from us, and they have a reciprocal view, so they know pretty jolly well what we're looking at. Every one of them was seduced by tens of thousands of dollars. Money. And this is, I said, we had a nice little rural community. We used to go play cards together on the Friday nights, and that was going on for years. And now, well, it's gone. We can't live there. We can't live amongst these people. And I'm sure if we would have got the wind farm stopped, we'd have been hated. So, either way, we can't win. Now, I'll say to Mr. Hydro Pacific there, I know you're not in Infogene Energy, but, if situations like this are allowed to happen, that these people, the wind farm developers must know, surely to God must know, that this sort of bitterness, this disgust is going to happen. Why do they go ahead with it?
Money.
Okay. Now, just a little anecdotal, if I may.
They deny that it breaks the law.
Of course they do, but we know it doesn't because we live there. Just as a little anecdotal on Steve's comments about the acoustic side of things. This house we've got that we live in, we've been there for 6 years now. We've got 2 wind turbines on our farm, 5 kilometres down the road. We moved to where we are to build a retirement home, 5k up the road, to get away from the noise of the turbines. They're 1.75 megawatt units. There's 2 of them, 750 metres away from the house on the downwind side. But still, the noise was distressing enough for us to want to leave. Besides, we had to retire soon anyway. We thought we could run the farm from there quite happily. Now, after we got the house built, we've been living there for 6 years now. I've been having problems like tinnitus, like waking up in blind paddocks in the middle of the night, my heart going absolutely crazy at any time of the day or night. Fits of absolute depression where I just want to lie down and go to sleep and not wake up. Now that's not me. I've never been like that. Now if I go away from the place, all these symptoms disappear and they come back after we've been. Now they only come back while we're in the house or in the sheds. Well, I've got 3 sheds, they've all got concrete floors. The house is a big masonry house, it's got a concrete floor. While we're inside the house, while the turbines are running, and I can't see them running because they're blocked by trees from us, I feel a sensation in my head like, about once a second, like my brain's being squeezed. Not pleasant, and I can't get away from it. I go out and have a look outside, and sure enough, the turbines are running. On days when the turbines aren't running, and they're still switched on, but they're not actually running, inside the house or inside the shed, I feel a deep drumming sound inside my head. That's very, very irritating. I can't get away from it. I go outside the sheds, outside the house. It's not there. Back inside, back it comes again. Now, for 6 years, I've been taking these medical problems to my medical clinic in Millicent, speaking to my doctors, and ECGs, blood tests, whatever other tests. The doctors can't find anything wrong. Now, I did discover I really should have spoken to the CEO of the Millicent Council, because he made a statement that nobody from the Millicent district that's associated with wind turbines has made any complaints or made any health issues. So maybe I should have spoken to the CEO of the Millicent Council when I had health problems instead of the Millicent Medical Clinic doctors. I don't know, perhaps he's got delusions of grandeur. He's been there 23 years now and I think it's too long.
Can I just say to the Pebble Press gentleman, are you hearing what he's saying, and do you deny it?
I can't deny anything anyone's saying, because only they can say what their opinion is.
The scientists saying he's wrong, is that right?
Yeah,
No, the scientists are saying none of it is proven, none of it has been shown to be proven over lots and lots of examinations.
I'm not saying that what my problems are wind farm related. It's just that when I go outside, I can't feel them, whether I go inside the sheds or the house, so it's not something specific. And I've got 3 sheds and 1 house, and I get the same symptoms in each one of them. I'm not saying that's the cause.
A couple of people have been extremely patient. If I could just take the guy, the gentleman at the back, please.
My name's Mike Nosky. I too work for Pebble Prince. I hear what people are saying, but if I can ask Steve a question. You said that DBA doesn't measure infrasound, and you showed us a line which is what the human ear or the human can detect. When you're measuring outright terms, do any of the infrasound measurements go above that? Is the first question. And I know you used the analogy of someone sleeping and hearing a baby, but you hear the baby because the baby crying emits a sound that is above what you can detect. So, are any of the noises that we measure detectable by the human ear? Simple as that.
Okay, certainly lots of the noises that I measured are detectable by the human ear, but I assume you want to qualify it by being below 20 hertz. Is that the correct statement? Yes, I've already said that the levels are shown in the SEN's report, and the measurements that I've got show that they're below that green line, and they should not be detectable. It's been looking at the reaction of the inner ear, and it has an outer hair cell and an inner hair cells. And the work that he's been doing, a lot of it was on rats and that, but also in looking at people, is that the outer hair cells are responding to these low frequencies and the inner hair cells are not. And he's recommended a criteria of what's called 60 dBg, which appears and is looking in some literature of people looking at it. The levels that are being measured in terms of sounds in houses and sounds near wind farms have exceeded that level in terms of a dBg.
Isn't DBG just another loading on the mission?
No, dBg is actually centred at 10 hertz and drops off down to 1 hertz and drops off down to 70 hertz. So it's looking at low frequency and infrasound, and it's an international standard that's been set to give some guidance for looking at how you measure it and come up with a thing like a dBA, but it's only concentrating on the low frequencies. In terms of the bit about hearing babies and crying and alarms and that, it becomes the circumstances of what it is, but a lot of people can hear it, or a lot of mothers can hear it when the father doesn't hear it as well.
About this issue, whichever side you're on, it's I guess the thing that worries us is often there's a lot of discussion and there isn't necessarily there's a lot of fiction behind what some people will say, and it's really good that tonight we've had this robust and interesting discussion. And look, I agree with a lot of what Steve said. I mean, I think, as an acoustician and what he's saying, it's pretty much consistent with what all the acoustic industry say. The difficulty comes with audible noise. That can be dealt with, and certainly, if there's issues, then and we would agree that you can always improve the regulations around audible noise. The difficulty is when it becomes to inaudible noise, and which is the infrasound that we've been talking about. Then it gets very difficult. So look, we as a responsible business, all we can do is rely on reputable bodies, government bodies and health bodies, and take the best advice that there is. And that's what we've been doing. So I'd like to thank Senator Madigan too for organising the evening. It's been great.
Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. It actually has been really good. We've been to a number of forums around the country, some big, some small, and with a lot of different reactions. There's a lot of emotion here, as you obviously can see, but everybody handled it very nicely, and I've got to say thank you for that. Now, I'm going to get John to just wrap up. Please, if you do have any questions you want to sort of continue with, just come and ask, and we'll see what we can answer. We're moving on from here tomorrow. We have another Wind Farm Forum in Bacchus Marsh, and Nick, unfortunately, still won't go to that one, but hopefully we'll be able to pick up and catch up with Nick at the South Australian one soon. But if you do have any inquiries, not just for tonight, please hop on the website, just come and Senator Madigan's website or Senator Xenophon's website, get the contact details. Sarah's here, I'm here. Matt with the camera is here as well for John. Ask us for the details, or send us an email if you've got queries, or if you want to give us some stuff, because this is going to be ongoing and we want it to be resolved for the satisfaction of everybody. Okay? So we'll just hand it over to John to finish up.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for respecting everybody's right to have their opinion. The second thing is, when Steve's made his presentation tonight, for most people, it takes a fair bit to absorb all of that. I've seen it a number of times, and I'm still absorbing it. So, that being said, all along, all I want is for those 7 recommendations to be acted upon, so that that 7 inquiry that was handed down just short of 2 weeks ago, two weeks last year now, just on a year ago, put 7 recommendations. And I think if you look at it analytically and the methodology behind what Steve is saying, it's brought it together and it's given us more of a focus, probably more than what the 7 recommendations had. So from that, and Wayne made the comment about all energy, the way it's produced, and there is drawbacks to everything. Nothing man-made is perfect, but as an elected representative of the people, I believe I have a duty of care to people. Now, with that duty of care is, I don't accept that 1% of the population, or 2%, or whatever it may be, if their health is trashed, that they are acceptable collateral damage. The fact is, I'm actually a boilermaker blacksmith, for those of you who have kept prints, so I understand very intimately the work you do out there, and I want you to be assured that I'm 100% for Australian jobs and 100% for Australian manufacturing. And let me also assure you that a lot of the people that I know from who have grave reservations about the health effects don't want you to be out of a job. And the majority of the people that I know also do want to find smarter ways to generate power, etc. if they're there. So I think what we've got, it's easy to pull down, smash things up and pull bridges down. It's another thing to build them. So the good thing about tonight is, and I'd have to say this is one of the best ones I've been to when people have listened to each other. So hopefully from tonight we've all learned something. I mean, I've learned quite a few things. There's quite a few things there that I'm going to look at from another angle to, investigate them. But I'd encourage all of you to talk to each other, because that's how we're going to solve this problem. And hopefully, in the not too distant future, we can get independent, eminent Australian research into this issue and get to the bottom of it. And there may be an engineering solution. It may be that we've got to have a setback from homes of however many kilometres, metres it may be. But until such time as we sit down, look at the problem, look at it analytically, get everybody to agree on the methodology of how we're going to look at this, we're not going to solve the problem. It's not going to go away. And look, I know a number of people who have grave problems with these wind farms. And all I can say to you is that people do not leave their homes. Some people have been in these homes for 4 or 5 generations. Some have bought a home. People don't leave their homes just for the hell of it. So let's get to the bottom of it. Let's get the people, the Steve Coopers of this world, the doctors and whoever, get them together and look at the problem and let's find the solution. Thank you.